Epistemology. 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 Without a theory of cognition, therefore, Mahayana philosophy becomes incomprehensible. The Lungka is quite explicit in assuming two forms of knowledge. The one for grasping the absolute or entering into the realm of mind only, and the other for understanding existence in its dualistic aspect in which logic prevails and the vijnanas are active. The latter is designated discrimination in the Lungka and the former transcendental wisdom or knowledge. To distinguish these two forms of knowledge is most essential in Buddhist philosophy. The Lungka is decidedly partial to the use of Ariyajanana instead of prajna, although the latter has been in use since the early days of Buddhism. Ariyajanana, noble wisdom, is generally coupled with pratyatma, inner self, showing that this noble, supreme wisdom is a mental function operating in the depths of our being. As it is concerned with the highest reality or the ultimate truth of things, it is no superficial knowledge dealing with particular objects and their relations. It is an intuitive understanding which, penetrating through the surface of existence, sees into that which is the reason of everything logically and ontologically. The Lungka is never tired of impressing upon its readers the importance of this understanding in the attainment of spiritual freedom. For this understanding is a fundamental intuition into the truth of mind only and constitutes the Buddhist enlightenment with which truly starts the religious life of a bodhisattva. This transcendental jnana is variously designated in the Lungka. It is pravikaya buddhi, that is, an insight fixed upon the ultimate ground of existence. It is svebuddhi, innate in oneself. Nirabhasa, or anabhasa, beyond all forms of tangibility. Nirvikalpa, beyond discrimination, meaning direct empirical knowledge before analysis starts in any form whatever. Which therefore is not at all expressible by means of words. The awaking of supreme knowledge is the theme of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. But in the Lungka the weight of the discourse is placed upon the realization by means of Ariyajanana of ultimate reality which is mind only. This psychological emphasis so distinctive of the Lungka makes the sutra occupy a unique position in Mahayana literature. The knowledge that stands contrasted to prajna or Ariyajanana is Vikalpa buddhi, or simply Vikalpa, which I have translated discrimination. It is relative knowledge working on the plane of dualism. It may be called the principle of dichotomy, whereby judgment is made possible. By us existence is always divided into pairs of conception, thesis, and antithesis, that is, being and non-being, permanent and impermanent, nirvana and samsara, birth and death, creating and created, this and that, me and not me, ad libitum. This is due to the working of Vikalpa. The lakshana of existence thus presented to us is not its real nature, it is our own thought construction. But our buddhi which seeks after pluralities fails to understand this fact and makes us cling to appearances as realities. As the result, the world in which we now find ourselves living ceases to be what it is in itself. For it is one we have constructed according to our own ignorance and discrimination. Reality escapes us, truth slips off our grasp, false views accumulate, wrong judgments go on adding complexities upon complexities. The habit energy thus created takes complete hold on the alaya-vijnana, and alaya the absolute is forever unable to extricate itself from these encumbrances. Eternal transmigration to no purpose must be our destiny. The twofold truth. The distinction between the highest truth and conventional truth is not explicitly held in the Lungka, but allusions are occasionally made to them. And it is said that false discrimination belongs to conventionalism. Another word for conventionalism is vyavahara, worldly experience, according to which we talk of things being born and destroyed, and also of the how, what, where, etc. of existence. This kind of knowledge does not help us to have an insight into the depths of being. The three svabhavas. Another way of classifying knowledge is known as three svabhavas in the Lungka. This is a generally recognized classification in all the schools of Mahayana Buddhism. Svabhava means self-nature or self-reality or self-substance, the existence of which in some form is popularly accepted. The first form of knowledge by which the reality of things is assumed is called parikalpita, imagined, that is, imagination in its ordinary sense. This is an illusion, for things are imagined to exist really where in fact there are none. It is like seeing a mirage which vanishes as one approaches. Imagined objects have, therefore, no objective reality. The second form of knowledge by which we examine existence is paratantra, depending upon another. This is a kind of scientific knowledge based on analysis. Buddhists make use of this knowledge to disprove the substantiality of individual objects, that is, the svabhavatva of things. According to them, there is nothing self-existing in the world, everything is depending for its existence on something else, things are universally mutually conditioned, endlessly related to one another. Dissect an object considered final, and it dissolves itself into airy nothingness. Modern scientists declare that existence is no more than mathematical formulae. The Mahayanists would say that there is no svabhava in anything appealing as such to the Vijnanas when it is examined from the paratantra point of view. The imagined view of reality does not give us a true knowledge of it, and the relativity view reduces it into nothingness. If so, where does our boat of enlightenment get anchored? The Lunka tells us that there is a third way of viewing existence, called paranishpanna, perfected, which allows us to become truly acquainted with reality as it is. It is this perfected knowledge whereby we are enabled to see really into the nature of existence, to perceive rightly what is meant by svabhava, and to declare that there is no svabhava as is imagined by the ignorant and that all is empty. Perfect or perfected knowledge issues from prajna or aryajanana or sometimes simply jnana, seeing into the suchness of things. It perceives things as they are, because going beyond the realm of being and non-being which belongs to discrimination, the principle of dichotomization, it dives into the abyss where there are no shadows. This is called self-realization. So states the Lunka that as the wise see reality with their eye of prajna, they ascertain definitely what it is, i.e. in its self-nature and not as is seen by the ignorant whose eye is never raised beyond the horizon of relativity. This is again called seeing into the emptiness of things. Emptiness, however, does not mean relativity, as is thought by some scholars. Relativity emptiness is on the lower plane of knowledge and does not reveal the real view of existence as it is. Emptiness taught in the Mahayana texts goes far deeper into the matter. It is the object of transcendental knowledge. As long as one stays in the world of relativity where logic rules supreme, one cannot have even the remotest idea of true emptiness or what is designated in the Prajnaparamita as Mahasunyata. The Lunka has also this kind of sunyata mentioned as one of the 7 emptinesses. Relativity emptiness so called corresponds to the first of the 7 emptinesses. While the Mahayana sunyata is Paramartha Aryajanana Mahasunyata, that is, the great void of noble wisdom which is the highest reality. The 5 dharmas. Before concluding this section, we must not forget to mention what is known as the 5 dharmas in the Lunka, making up one of the main topics of discourses. The 5 dharmas and the 3 svabhavas are different ways of classifying the same material. The 5 are appearances, names, discrimination, right knowledge, and suchness. The first 3 correspond to the 2 of the 3 svabhavas, parikalpita and paratantra, while the last 2 belong to the paranishpanna. Our relative knowledge starts with perceiving appearances to which names are given. Names are then thought real and discrimination is carried on. We can say that discrimination has been with us from the first even when what is called perception has not taken place. For naming is impossible without some form of discrimination. Then the worst thing comes upon us as we begin to persuade ourselves and think that by giving names existence has been successfully disposed of, and feel comfortable about the problems of religion. Although without naming no knowledge is possible, right knowledge is not to be had here. For this is the inexpressible, the unnamable, it is the meaning not to be grasped by words. In this the Lunka permits no equivocation, it most emphatically advises us not to attach ourselves to words. The object of right knowledge is suchness of things as not conditioned by the category of being and non-being. It is in this sense that ultimate reality is said to be like the moon in the water, it is not immersed in it, nor is it outside it. We cannot say that the moon is in water, for it is a mere reflection. But we cannot say that it is not there, for a reflection though it may be, it is really before us. Plurality of objects is not real from the point of view of relativity as well as from the point of view of suchness. If someone declares such reality as maintained by the Mahayana is too ethereal, too phantom-like, too unreal for our religious aspirations, the Lanka will immediately retort, you are still on the plane of relativity. When the Aryajanana is awakened, Tathata is the most real thing and a term most fittingly applied as far as our power of designation is concerned. 3. The message of the Lanka. There are many other thoughts of interest in the Lanka which may be discussed in this introduction. But as I have already given up many pages to it, and as the reader who wishes to know more about the sutra may go to my studies in the Lankavatara, I will say just a few words about the position of the sutra among the general Mahayana Buddhist texts. While we are still in the dark as to how Mahayana Buddhism developed in India, we know that when it was introduced into China by the missionaries from India and Central Asia, it was already regarded as directly coming from the Buddha's own golden mouth. And that what must have developed during several hundred years after his death was taken in a wholesale manner for a system fully matured in his lifetime, extending over a period of about half a century after his enlightenment. As the sutras were translated into Chinese, the first of which appeared in 68 A.D., they profoundly stirred the Chinese and then the Japanese mind, awakening their religious consciousness to its very depths. The following are the most important Mahayana texts that thus served to move the religious feelings of the Far Eastern peoples and are still continuing to do so. The Saddharmapundarika Sutra. One of the main theses of this inspiring scripture is the announcement that the Buddha never died, that he is forever living on the Mount of the Holy Vulture and preaching to a group of the Sravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, who are no less beings than ourselves, and that the Buddha has just one vehicle for all beings. This must have been a revolutionary teaching at the time when the Buddha was thought to be just as transient and mortal as ourselves, and when the only thing that was left behind after his nirvana was his dharma, in which his followers were asked to find their master. The Avalokitesvara Vikarvananirdasa. This is commonly known as Kwannon-gyo in Japan and forms the 24th chapter of the Sanskrit Saddharmapundarika. But it will be better to treat it as a separate document, as it has quite an independent message and has been so considered, though not always consciously, by its devotees. Avalokitesvara is here represented as a god of mercy who will help anybody who finds himself in trouble spiritually as well as materially. In popular minds, the god is no more masculine than feminine. If anything, more feminine, because of mercy being more reality associated with eternal femininity. That he can assume various forms in order to achieve his ends appeals very much to the religious imagination of the Eastern peoples. And this doctrine of transformation is one of the characteristic features of Mahayana Buddhism. The Avatamsaka Sutra. This is an encyclopedic sutra of which we find the Gandavyaha and the Desabhumika forming a part. It is another Mahayana sutra that has influenced the Chinese and the Japanese mind profoundly. The so-called interpenetration which constitutes the central thought of the sutra is symbolically and effectively treated in the Chinese translations by Buddhabhadra, by Sikshananda, and by Prajna. The sutra as we have it now contains many sutras which may be considered independent, though they no doubt belong to the same class of literature. The reading may be tedious from the modern point of view, as the main theme is not so succinctly presented, and it takes some time before the reader can get into the mood of the sutra itself. After a quiet and patient pursuit of the text, however, he cannot help but be deeply impressed with its underlying spirit, whose grandeur of outlook almost surpasses human comprehension. The huge rock-cut figure of Vairocana at Lungmen and the bronze figure in Nara are respectively the Chinese and the Japanese artistic response to the spiritual stimulation caused by the Avatamsaka, or the Gandavyaha, which is the same thing. Another profound effect produced by the sutra on the Eastern mind is the conception of the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra with his 10 inexhaustible vows. he would not enter into nirvana, that coveted object of all the Buddhists, because he would not have one single soul unsaved behind him. And by this soul was meant not only human soul but the soul of every being animate or inanimate. It was the vow of Samantabhadra to release animals, plants, and even such inanimate existences as mountains, waters, earths, etc. from the bondage of ignorance and karma. His universe, moreover, was far wider and more spiritualistic than our ordinary one. The Prajnaparamita Sutra. This is regarded by most Mahayana scholars to have been one of the first Mahayana literature that was declared against the hair-splitting scholastic philosophy of early Buddhist doctors. Gives us the doctrine of emptiness or void, whereby every possible straw of attachment is taken away from us. To be left alone in the void, even with this void vanishing from around us, is the method of perfect emancipation proposed by the Prajnaparamita. This was quite a direct, straightforward proposition on the part of the Mahayanist. It appealed greatly to intellectual minds as well as the mystical. While the Avatamsaka filled the universe with things of imagination even to its minutest particle, the Prajnaparamita swept everything away from the universe, which now becomes a vast void indeed. And in 600 fascicles of the sutra we are warned not to be afraid of, not to be taken aback by this vast void. If we stagger at this gospel of absolute emptiness, we are told by the Buddha that we cannot be good followers of the Mahayana. The Vimalakirti Sutra. This is a masterpiece, a drama with great literary merit, and because of this fact it is read more generally than other Buddhist sutras by the laity. The signification of the sutra lies in taking our soiled coat of attachment off our back, which we have been wearing ever since we became aware of an external existence. Another significant feature of the sutra is that its chief figure of interest is not the Buddha but a wealthy layman called Vimalakirti. It is this crafty old gentleman philosopher who puts to shame all the Sravakas and Bodhisattvas coming to argue with him about the deepest truths of Buddhism. Except Manjusri, the head of the Bodhisattvas. The latter proved a good match for the eloquence of the lay disciple of the Buddha. What we have to notice especially in this Mahayana text is that Buddhism does not require us to lead a homeless life as a bhikshu in order to attain enlightenment. That is, the householder's life is as good and pure as the mendicant's. In this respect the Srimala Sutra is also significant, for Srimala, the queen inspired by the wisdom and power of the Buddha, delivers a great sermon on the Tathagata Garbha. The Mahayana may be said to be the revolt of laymen and laywomen against the ascetic spirit of exclusion pervading among early advocates of Buddhism. The Sukhavati-vyuha-sutra. The influence of this sutra on Oriental people is quite different from that of the other sutras. For it has awakened the faith aspect of their religious consciousness, which is established on the general basis of Mahayana philosophy. Superficially, the faith of Amitabha looks very much like Christian faith in Christ, but the underlying thoughts are not at all the same. The Jodo school could not take its rise from any other soil than Mahayana Buddhism. In Japan this school has achieved a unique development, marking a spiritual epoch in the history of religious faith in the East. The Parinirvana Sutra. This once formed the foundation of the Nirvana school in the early history of Chinese Buddhism. Its main assertion is that the Buddha nature is present in every one of us. Before the arrival of the sutra in China, it was generally believed that there was a class of people known as Ikanti who had no Buddha nature in them and therefore who were eternally barred from attaining enlightenment. This belief was entirely expelled. However, when a statement to the contrary was found in the sutra, saying that there is something in all beings which is true, real, eternal, self-governing, and forever unchanging. This is called ego, though quite different from what is generally known as such by the philosophers. This ego is the Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, which exists in every one of us, and is characterized with such virtues as permanency, bliss, freedom, and purity.